All right. Well, I think we are live and recording now, and I'm thrilled today to introduce Carol McClain. She reached out to me after I put a call out for interviews for authors on my blog, and we're just going to chat today about Carol's writing, find out a little bit about her and her books and her heart for what she's putting out there for readers. And welcome, Carol. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Thrilled to have you. So we just want to start by getting to know you a little bit. Tell us about yourself, your family.
Yeah. Well, I am a mother of one, grandmother of three. My husband and I got very tired of New York on many levels. Politics, for one, but we won't go there because the words of my mouth are going to be acceptable to the Lord. The weather, ditto, we're not going to go there either. And so we decided to make the move from Tennessee. And I thought it was going to be a huge culture shock because we were right on the border of Canada. The news I listened to is Canadian. The people I associated with was Canadian. It was almost like if you tripped, you were in another country and needed to show your passport.
Mhm.
So we got tired of it and we moved down here, and I live north of Knoxville. When I look out my front door, I see the Cumberland Mountains,
Yeah.
and Tennessee is just beautiful. And there's hardly anything I don't like about it. Allergy season is not good to me. Um, in northern New York, it was too cold to grow a lot of stuff. So we just had a small variety of flora down here. It's never ending. The weather is fabulous, except for July and August, which I would just assume would skip us. It is so humid all the time. Before I moved, I taught English for over 30 years in the secondary level. Down here, I work for Western Governors University as a clinical supervisor for student teachers, which I love because I think of all fields, teaching is still my passion.
Mm.
And even though the bureaucracy and changes in education and so on have gotten disheartening for many educators, it does help me keep my hand on the school, on the pulse of the children, on encouraging other people to follow their passion and become teachers.
Yeah, I think this year, 2020, has really shown us how much we need to value our teachers more than ever.
Yes, and that's the scary thing with this pandemic. So many kids are going to be lost. I know my granddaughter is now in first grade. She lost half of kindergarten, and they only just started going back to school after Thanksgiving. So she lost a lot of time there. Her socialization, her ability to realize she's not the center of the universe has really suffered.
Yeah.
Her handwriting's atrocious because she's always on a keyboard, you
Mhm.
know, on a device in some way. And so I just hate to see us lose a generation of children because of this.
Yeah. Well, let's have to entrust it to the Lord and see what happens.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing. Like, how did you start writing and when? And just tell a little bit about that.
Well, my writing, I never started in the typical way where people say they came out of the womb with a pencil in their hand writing stories, and it wasn't that way. I was a dreamer pretty much. I like to think I had dysgraphia where you can't write because you can't read my handwriting. I can't read my handwriting. So I just lived as a child in a dream world. And I remember somewhere around third grade thinking, I can make a book out of this. And I did start to write it. And then all my classmates thought that was wonderful. And they wrote the lamest stories I had ever heard in my life. They weren't up to my caliber. And I quit writing. So, but then through the rest of my childhood, I'd make up plays and the kids would just want to play whatever I made up. So we'd make up plays. And then I decided I could become rich, and I charged our parents a penny to come watch us, four parents. And eventually I moved on to that awful adolescent poetry. And poetry still is one of my first loves in writing. I love reading it. I like writing it. I love language.
Mm.
I was an AP English language teacher, so that was perfect for me. So I love language, and so I did the poetry. And it wasn't until later, when I was teaching my AP course, I decided, I wonder if I could write a book. It still was just foreign to me that somebody could write, I don't know, 300 pages of a story that kept you riveted. And so that became my first book, which has recently been re-released as The Perils of Cheryl.
Mhm.
So that's that's pretty much how I started. And then I quit, I think, probably 2 or 3 times a year. I quit writing. And then I always get drawn back to it. And I find my happy place
Mhm.
um, is is on the written page. But I especially I don't like the first draft. I like the noodling with the rhythms of the sentences and the sounds of the words and
Mhm.
just trying to express whatever theme it is that I'm working on. That's the part that I love the best. So when
Mhm.
I get into the editing part, I'm in heaven.
Yeah, I love that part too. And, a lot of writers just really don't like that part, but I do because you see your story really develop and get better and better every time you edit. And that's exciting.
Yeah, yes, it is. It is.
So,
So
what made you decide to write contemporary novels?
mostly because I like suspense,
Yeah,
but I couldn't figure out how to think that darkly and,
I
and
love
put
suspense too. I love reading it.
putting all the little pieces together. Historical, I like good historical, not just that it's a contemporary story set in a different era. I like the historical, like Philippa Gregory and that sort of thing, where you're really learning about the history. And I don't have a good enough grasp on history and that research. So that seemed too far out of my capabilities. But the work that I am most drawn to are things like memoir, autobiography, contemporary fiction, and all those deal with people and the issues that they have and how they solve them. And I don't like easy answers because there aren't. Bad things happen to Christians.
Yes.
And when you become a Christian, your problems don't disappear.
Mhm.
I think when I became a Christian, my problems intensified because all of a sudden I had this crude lump of clay that was me,
Yes.
and God had to take away all the garbage.
Mhm.
And
It's
that
painful.
part, yeah, it was very painful, very, very painful. And so, it was people would say, oh, it's a crutch. Christianity is a crutch. And I say, it's the first time ever that I faced reality and accepted me for who I am.
Mhm.
And from there, it's been an ongoing, process. So I moved to contemporary fiction, uh, essentially women's fiction, and and it deals with real life people. It's not the rich and famous or the beautiful or people like that, but they're good people who are facing real problems, and how do they solve
Mhm.
that real problem?
Those are
Yeah,
my favorite stories to read.
yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love.
because it makes me like historical, like good historical fiction. I come away from the book entertained. I'm reading to be entertained, even if it's a memoir or autobiography. I'm not reading a textbook. I'm reading, excuse me, I'm reading to be entertained, but I learn, and my husband and I currently are watching a TV series that deal with the spies on Long Island, and that's where during the Revolutionary War, and that's where I grew up. And I've learned so many things that I never knew, while being riveted by a very good story. So that's why I write women's fiction. And
So,
plus, like with history, I don't know enough history. Um, I know about women. I know about the dream world, so I know about fiction, yeah. And no matter how dark though my stories get, it's generally laced with humor. You
Mm,
know, even
every-
when I don't think I'm being humorous, people are saying they're laughing. So it's, yeah.
So how do you incorporate Christ in your, your Christianity into your stories?
It's how essentially the people solve their problems. Um, I had one in yesterday's Poison, and in this particular case, and this isn't the way it usually happens. I had a girl, a young woman, who had been a bully, and she was abused as a child. She had a miserable mother, and she found herself homeless and out in the rain and cold and miserable, and she just wanted to get out of it. And she walked past a church and she said, warmth. And inside she found out, like the little coffee stand and all of that. So she had warm coffee and all of that. When she heard the message, she actually at that point accepted Christ. Now that rarely happens, but it happened in this particular book. And it took her, that was fairly early in the book, and it took her the rest of the book before she really was able to walk in the faith and solve the problem. So it's usually some form of scripture that comes in and helps people
Mhm.
solve. In a New York Yankee on Stinking Creek, which won the Dragonfly Book Award,
Right.
um, the essential difference, it was an atheist and a preacher's wife, and they were both extremes, atheist, and she was rigid rule follower. Their lives were thrown together because the atheist needed help and the preacher's wife was all who could help her. And through it, they discovered that they were two sides of the same cookie. If you have a black and white cookie, yeah, they taste the same and they look a little different, but really the same. So it really, dealt with judgment and things like that. So it's this Christian theme that dominates the book and helps the people solve their crises.
So are any of your stories based on your own personal experience or history?
Yeah, it's the New York Yankee on Stinking Creek. A friend of mine in California really wanted me to write the book when I moved down here from Northern New York, North versus South and the difference. And I'm old enough to have, the easy rider mentality and deliverance. And yeah, the South was just this backward place, blah, blah, blah. And so my friend from California, another nice liberal state, said, oh, write the book, write the book. But when I came down here, I discovered there was no difference at all, except for cornbread and the dialogue. My husband and I love cornbread. We went to a church dinner and it was beans and greens or something, but the saving grace was that they had cornbread, big fluffy piece of cornbread. And we took a bite of it. No sugar, no, it was crumbly. It was awful. And there was that. And then we had some workers here at another time working on a water problem we had. And my husband went down and was talking to them for about half an hour. And I came up and I said, well, what were you talking about? And he said, not sure. I think it was fishing. Because when we first came down here, the hill dialect was just hard for us to understand. So
Yeah.
that was the only difference. The people are warm and kind and friendly. Um, they're human beings, they're Northerners who live in Tennessee. The people in New York are, Tennesseans who live in New York. They're all the same. And so that became the catalyst for the book. So that's fairly based on my life. And Stinking Creek was just a silly naming town that's, 15 miles north of us. So, that was pretty much probably based on my life.
Yeah. So on a personal note, what other kind of hobbies or things do you enjoy besides writing?
Let's see. I do stained glass. I'm a stained glass artist. I just started learning pottery, so it's just hand built pottery, and I run, and I just picked up my bassoon again.
Mm.
So I'm going to see. I'm trying to just even remember my bass clef. It's been about 5 years since I've played, So, I play a little bassoon, play around with photography, but it's mostly the arts, all my life.
Mm.
I've been art oriented, so that's pretty much what I do. And then I run to clear my head, to solve a plot problem, to de-stress, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my brainstorming
Yeah,
session.
you have lots of uh, things going on that you enjoy. That's great. And am I correct that your husband's a pastor or?
Yes, he's a retired United Methodist pastor.
Okay.
Yeah, he married an evangelical, hanging from the ceiling Pentecostal Christian, and he's a more liturgical United Methodist than we go to a Baptist church. So we're very ecumenical.
That's awesome. So back to writing a little bit. So how long on average would you say it takes you when you sit down to write a book, say the first draft?
Oh, I don't write straight through. So to say I write a first draft and then go back is I write the first draft over like a day. I write a couple of chapters. The next day I go back to what I wrote and revise it.
So you
And then,
edit as you go.
yeah, and then I put down some more. And then I go back and redo and go back and redo, and then it goes to critique partners and so on. It takes me, I would say, roughly a year to have a finished, polished book. To actually write it is maybe 9 months.
Mhm.
And then there's all the um, back and forth with an editor, the publisher, and all of that, fun stuff, which
Mhm.
actually I don't mind. Like I said, I like playing with words,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. So what do you hope readers would take away from your book? It's called The Perils of Cheryl.
Tales of Cheryl. And this particular book, this one just came out. It was originally published as DWF, Divorced White Female. And that publisher went out of business. So I just republished this one myself in preparation for the one that's coming out in February, which is Borrowed Lives from Elk Lake Publishers.
Okay.
So the main takeaway is that, well, my main character knows only one thing at all is going to save her: a man, any man, so long as he's hot. She's been ditched by her husband. She's sassy. She's unsaved. She is like me. And we talk about things from, except that I'm saved. Um, she's like me, and she's ditched by her husband, and she just wants to show him that a man finds her attractive too. But she's got some whacked out kids, and she's got, her oldest is this real hippie, changing her major as often as we change our clothes kind of thing, who is kind of like me. She does have an OCD daughter who's patterned on a friend's son, and then she has a surprise baby, her husband's parting gift.
Hmm.
And through it, she discovers, as she's trying to put her life back together, what's really important. It's not dependence on a man, it's reliance on things that are of value in her life. Her children, for one. She has a young boy who had gotten in trouble with drugs, but now has been saved and pulls her to church. Um, and the church is an evangelical church where she had been raised Catholic, you know, and she eventually understands that she is a sinner, and she needs to get that straightened out. So, the main purpose, the main takeaway from that book is externals aren't going to make your life better. You have to focus on what's of value, and then ultimately focus on Christ.
Amen.
And this one's just mostly a laugh out loud, funny kind of book.
And you've offered to give a copy of that book for free to one of our viewers who comments on this post. So I wish I could win. I'll just have to go buy it for myself and read it. I'm really interested to read it now after talking to you and hearing your heart and you're writing about women's issues and real people, and that's really what I enjoy so much. So as we start to wrap this up, any last words for your readers? Anything you want to say about how they can support you moving forward? Um,
There is, to support me personally, to sign up for my newsletter. That is just really critical for me. And also, um, don't be afraid to reach out to an author you might know. The other day, a friend of mine who's actually on my launch team said, "Hey, look, here are some fans." And it was on a post that she made that two of the people were talking about a New York Yankee on Stinking Creek and how much they loved it, and on and on and on. And it just really made my day. So don't be afraid to, like, on my website and every author's website, there's a contact link. You can contact the author and just say, I read this book of yours. It was great. And
yeah,
it might take somebody who's ready to quit and go, I could do this,
yeah.
and go on. So,
Yeah, we all need encouragement, right?
yeah, so sign up for my newsletter.
Yeah.
But I don't have one of those obnoxious sites where you, the thing pops up and you can't get to what you want to get to unless you sign up. You just, at the top of the page, you can sign up. And
I just love the title of that book, the Stinking Creek one.
yeah, where it came from actually was Mark Twain had written A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And I have the satirical sense of humor of Mark Twain. And when I was originally thinking about the anachronism of sophisticates, and I thought this would be fun, where somebody, and I honestly didn't think of people, in a pejorative way. But I was thinking of that kind of perhaps anachronism. And so I could have this New Yorker come down and try to show the people down here how to live. And yeah, no, and she had to learn how to live. So
Yeah.
that's where the title came from.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. It's been fun.
Thank you. It was fun to be here.
Yeah, and I hope people will take this interview and watch it and get to know you and your writing and subscribe to your newsletter, and you'll get some sales, and we'll just explode from there, right?
Thank you, Gina.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
it's a pleasure too. Thank you very much.